Special thanks for Mr. Chris Sawton. The following presentation will be held by Dr. Ali Al-Hoorie. Ali Al-Hoorie is Assistant Professor at the English Language Institute, Education Sector, Royal Commission for Jubail and Yanbu, Saudi Arabia. He completed his PhD degree in Applied Linguistics at the University of Nottingham under the supervision of Professors Zoltan Dorni and Norbert Schmidt. He also holds an MA with distinction in Social Science Data Analysis from Essex University. On behalf of you, I would like to welcome him to the stage.
No. Is the okay? So many people over the years have expressed misgivings about the role of technology and the impact it's having on us, both at the individual and at the societal level. Particularly when mobile phones have become more and more popular. Now they are no longer distracting just drivers, but even pedestrians walking in the street, to the extent that New York is considering banning using your phone while walking in the street, not driving. And a violation would be up to 1,000 riyals. So this is how serious it has become. They are also distracting students in class, as I'm sure you can relate to, and students even outside of class. So 15 years ago, when I walked in hallways, I would see students actually standing up and socializing with each other and talking. Nowadays, when you walk in the hallways, you're going to see students glued to their mobile phones. And also for many people, mobile phones is the first thing you reach to in the morning after waking up to check your messages. So many people have started thinking how much is too much and whether we need special lanes for pedestrians using their mobile phones and whether there are any health effects of overusing mobile phones. And when it comes to video games, there's even more controversy about it. Video games have been blamed for some health problems like obesity, children no longer doing as much physical exercise, cognitive problems. Instead of studying math or English, they spend hours and hours on video games. Social problems, children need to socialize at a young age, but they don't because they are glued to their video consoles. Mental problems related to depression and aggression, especially with violent video games. And just this year, there have been calls on social media to ban PUBG because of the effect it's having on the Saudi society. Just this month also, there was a mass shooting in the United States with dozens killed and injured. And just 13 hours later, there was another mass shooting. And these have been blames on the gruesome and grisly video games. I'm looking at the yellow part only. A culture that celebrates violence because of violence in video games. Video games that dehumanize individuals. And a video game industry that teaches young people to kill. But there is always another side to every story. So many people are saying that this is not true and video games are actually innocent. It's not related to aggression in society. So the media jumped all over it. Trump and Republicans continue to blame video games. Don't blame video games, USA Today. Los Angeles Times, no link between video games and violence. The Washington Post, why we scapegoat video games for mass violence and why it's a mistake. Forbes, video game industry rejects criticism. And after 13 hours of bloodshed, Trump blames video games for mass shootings, but the facts say otherwise. So this issue of video games have become a very hot topic, not in this digital age, not in this year, in this particular month. All these reports appeared just this month, August 2018, because 19, because of the importance of video games and the role they are playing in everyday life now. So, because this is a very important topic and we want to know whether video games are harmful to our children, and so we should protect our children from video games or not, I will spend just a few minutes to look at the evidence, and then I will move to video games and language learning more specifically. So this is a very famous graph that's used by people who are saying video games do not cause violence. So this graph shows violence in different countries, the vertical axis, and gun ownership in the horizontal axis. And you see that the United States has more guns and more mass shootings. And so this has been used as evidence that it's not actually the video games, it's just the gun control laws. And you see there's Yemen, there's Afghanistan, France, Canada, and all the other countries. This graph comes from a peer-reviewed study by a researcher at the University of Alabama, Adam Lankford. This researcher analyzed 171 countries, and he used data from 1966 to 2020, and published this study. But another study by a researcher from Florida State University found no evidence. So there is some conflicting evidence in this regard. So the media jumped all over again. Fox News, critics shoot holes, pun intended, in widely guided gun study. And gun control researcher, you can't see my data. So what's going on here? So again, going back to this graph, when researchers saw this graph, they said, wait a minute. Where did you get data on Yemen, on mass shootings, and gun ownership for a period of 50 years? Where did you get this information from? It's not available online. Nobody could access it. What about Afghanistan? What about the other countries? So can we see your data? Did you adjust for country size? Did you adjust for other things, other statistical controls? Can we see your data? He said no. So again, the media got nasty again. The Lankford study is nothing more than junk science disguised as research, and never should have been published in a responsible scholarly journal. So it's a very hot topic because everybody wants to know whether these video games are the cause or something else is the cause. So what do we expect from theories? When we look at theories, do we expect that playing violent video games more specifically lead our kids to be more aggressive or not? So there is one theory that says yes, if children play video games, they will become more aggressive because they are exposed to this aggression. But there is another theory called the Catharsis Model. It actually predicts the opposite. If children or anybody else plays a video game, they will become less aggressive because they will release their aggression in video games. So they will become less aggressive. A third model also predicts a decrease, but through a different mechanism. Simply, young people will stay at home playing video games, not hanging out in the streets, and actually hanging out in the streets is a major cause of societal problems. So let's look at the data. So the Catharsis Model, the releasing model. So in a study by Ward 2011, the researcher found a negative association between sales of video games in a country and crime rate. So if video games actually causing violence, once they become popular in a country, we would expect more violence. But the researcher actually found a negative relationship. Violence decreases. In another study, the researchers look at violent movies this time. And again, there was a decrease in aggression in the weekend of the movie's release and the following week. And this seems to support the incapacitation model. People just stay at home to watch it, so there's less trouble for the society. In another study, the researchers retrieved crime records from the police over time, and then they obtained the release dates of different violent games over time, and they compared them, the two sets of data, over time, and they found that when there is a video game release, a violent video game is released, there is less aggression. The crime rate drops. So in another study, the authors call it rhetoric versus data. Again, they found a similar decreasing pattern. So the researchers said, OK, we need some longitudinal research to understand this phenomenon. So in a study published just a few months ago in Nature, the researchers said, OK, we want to do an experiment. We want to make sure. So they had one group playing Grand Theft Auto, which is a very violent video game. You can actually get a military-grade tank, drive it in the street, start shooting at people, and you can wreak havoc in the city. Then another group played The Sims, which is a very friendly game, just like Second Life. You can choose your gender, your skin color, your hairstyle, your outfit, whether you have superpowers, whether you have wings, you can fly, you have a house and a garden, and people. It's a very addictive game for many people because you can live your fantasies in it, but it's not violent, unlike Grand Theft Auto. And then there was a control group who played nothing. And so at the beginning of the experiment, the researchers gave the participants all sorts of tests, attitudes, impulsivity, mental health, all sorts of things. And they had their participants play for 2 months in a row. Want to see whether playing video games 2 months in a row affects them or not. Then they found no negative impact. Whether the participant played the extreme game, Grand Theft Auto, The Sims, the friendly but addictive game, or no game. There was no negative impact. So the researchers said, OK, maybe the negative impact appears after a while. It doesn't appear immediately. So 2 months after the end of the study, they gave these tests to the participants again. Again, nothing. There was nothing even 2 months afterwards. So the researchers say that there is strong evidence against the frequently debated negative effects of playing violent video games. So, but some other research has found actually positive effects of playing video games, especially for children. So in a paper titled Play That Can Do Serious Good, which is an interesting title. So the researchers argued that playing video games is actually better for children than watching television. Because watching television is passive. You just look at the screen. But when you play video games, it's more interactive. You have to make decisions. They also argued that specifically action video games promote perceptual, attentional, and cognitive abilities. Because when it's an action game, you have to respond quickly. You have to have better eye-hand coordination. You have to have dexterity and agility and fast response. So this helps children develop. They also argued that the video games promote job-related skills, which might come as a surprise at the beginning. But if you think about it, when children play video games, they have to take turns. So they have to respect each other's turn. In some games, there are multiplayers, so they have to strategize. You do this, and I do that, so there's cooperation. In some games, you have an amount of virtual money. So you have to think how to use this money to buy different things so that you don't lose. So it helps them to think how to use the money they have. So they teach children complex and difficult tasks and abilities. Not only for young people, also for older people, there is evidence showing that playing video games protects against mental decline. So if you want to protect your brain, play video games. So what about language learning more specifically? So a few years ago, I wrote a paper reviewing the most promising trends in the field, and one of them was technology, and more particularly, interactive 3D gaming like Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, World of Witchcraft, The Sims, Second Life, Unity, and all these games. Children play hours and hours these games. Can we use them for educational purposes? They are playing the game anyway. In another study by Jack Richards, the title was The Changing Face of Language Learning. It's an interesting title. The children of today are not the children of yesterday. And our educational system has to adapt to this change. So again, he had a section on digital games saying most young people, as well as many adults, play digital games. And these offer possibilities both for entertainment as well as language learning. So if we want to have our students play video games, not all games are the same. Some games will be boring. If we ask students to play a game, they will just play one day and then forget about it because it's boring. So what characteristics make the game motivational and effective? So one characteristic is being adaptive, like a placement test. If the game is too difficult or too easy, it will not be effective. It will be boring to the students. So the game has to give the student a placement test at the beginning, and then different learners will play the game at different levels at the same time. Another characteristic is spaced repetition, which comes from memory research. Memory researchers have argued that you need revision over time, and they have established how often do you need revision so that you recall information. So an effective game has to apply principles from spaced repetition. Another principle is the uncertainty. When you play a game, you don't know whether you are going to win or to lose. This uncertainty is motivational. It has to do with dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter in the brain that is very important for motivation. No dopamine, no motivation. So to explain this, this is from Sapolsky 2017. This study was done on animals, but Sapolsky reviews other studies on humans as well, so the same pattern emerges. So in this study, they trained a monkey to press a lever 10 times in order to get a reward, which is common in animal research. You do an activity, then you get a reward. But this time, between the end of the pressing the levers and the reward, there was a 1-minute gap. Okay, so after pressing the lever 10 times, the monkey has to wait for 1 minute before receiving the reward, and they measured the amount of dopamine happening. They found that there is some dopamine while pressing the lever, but after pressing the lever, there was no dopamine. What does this mean? This means that the monkey just sat down and said, OK, I'm on top of it. The reward is coming just after 1 minute. No need to worry. Just 1 minute, and you will get the reward. So the researchers said, OK, let's change the design between the end of the work and the reward. And instead of giving the monkey the reward 100% of the time, we give it only 50% of the time to introduce this element of uncertainty. What do you think happened to dopamine? It jumped all over. The suspense. What's going to happen? So the poor monkey is pressing the lever 10 times and then waiting, anticipating. What's going to happen? Is there a reward? No reward? Which is ironic because you are giving the reward fewer times, but there is more motivation, which is an interesting pattern. So it's all about dopamine. So even if you are not into bowling, you can't help but follow the ball and see whether the ball is going to hit the pins or not. You can't help it. You want to know. Even if you don't know this player, you are not into bowling, there's nothing for you personally to gain or lose. It's just you want to know, this curiosity, because there is an element of uncertainty. It's going, it's going, it's going, it's swerving. No, 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 no. It's coming back. It's coming back. Yes, yes. Oh. No, no, no. Oh. You see the excitement happening here, because what's going to happen next? You know, it's just this uncertainty excites the person watching it, because what's going to happen next? There is no uncertainty here. So this has been called the motivation of maybe. You know, if there is, you are not sure, maybe this is very motivational. Okay? If there is certainty, it becomes monotonic and mechanical. You know, there is no motivation. The motivation of near miss. When you play a game and you near miss, you say again, 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 and play again, and you near miss, and again, again, again. And when you finally lose, you don't say my character died, I died. See? You identify with the game because of this uncertainty principle. So how do we apply this in the classroom? How do we apply uncertainty? Obvious application is not to tell your students at the beginning of the class, okay, this is an easy course, everybody will pass, don't worry about it. So do you think your students will study? Oh, you know, students will think, okay, if I study hard or don't study, if I am present or absent, I will pass the course, so, you know, why should I study? Also, if we go to the other extreme, and we tell students, okay, it's a difficult course, everybody will fail. Students will be upset, but then are they going to study if they believe that they will fail? But if they believe that there is a 50% chance to pass, and they have to study for it, then this is, again, the motivation of maybe. Even if eventually most of them will pass, it's the perception that matters. So, we did a study to test this, myself and Mr. Al-Bijadi. So we wanted to test this idea in our students. So we applied for funding. And we did have this reaction. So you want money for students to play a game? Are you sure about this? So we had to explain, no, it's not just a game, it's for vocabulary, and we are going to give students tests, and we want to examine the effect. And so they finally approved it. Thank you. Okay. So we tested a game called Words and Monsters, developed by a Japanese company and called Lexica. And this is how the game looks like. It's a mobile phone game. You have some sort of enemies or a foe, sometimes a spider, sometimes a different monster, different things. You have to progress over levels. And to play this game, first you have to answer a vocabulary question. If you answer incorrectly, the monster will hit you. But if you answer it correctly, now it's your turn to hit the monster. Okay? So you have to aim. Maybe there's more than one. You have to choose the right weapon. You have to aim. And even after you answer the vocabulary question correctly, you may hit, you may miss. So the students have to think and everything, so get excited about this uncertainty. So this game also uses placement tests. The students have to take a placement test within the app itself, and then so that they play the game at their own levels. There is spaced repetition. They recruited linguists and memory researchers to design the game with them. So we had 83 experimental participants who played this game for 1 month. And then we have 102 controls. We gave them a pretest, a vocabulary pretest, and then a post-test at the end of the experiment, and then a delayed post-test 1 month afterwards, after it was holiday and Eid, and they come afterwards. We want to check long-term retention of vocabulary learned during playing this game. This is the results. So the blue line is the experimental group. At the beginning, there was no statistically significant difference between the two groups, but in the post-test, there is a massive increase in vocabulary scores. Big increase. In the delayed post-test, when students stopped playing, it was holiday, their level of the experimental group started to drop, but it was still significantly larger than the experimental group 1 month after the study. So we had evidence that playing video games improves vocabulary acquisition in our students. So at the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that many people, upon waking up in the morning, they reach out to their phones to check their messages. But imagine this scenario. One of our students here in the ELI, waking up in the morning, also reaching out to his phone, but not to check his messages, but to check the game he has been playing. And he's actually a member of a team trying to defeat other teams by answering as many English questions as possible. So he starts vigorously answering questions to help his team. He's still in bed, hasn't gotten up. So finally he gets up, excited, goes to class to learn more English so that he can come back and play the game, helping his team to win. This will be fun, but also serious education. Thank you. I don't think there is time for questions. Do you have time for it? I don't think so. Yeah. So, but I will be here if you have any questions, or you can email me if you want. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Special thanks for Dr. Ali Al-Hoorie. And now I would like to invite Dr. Anwar Zahrani, the director of the English Language Institute, to honor the speakers. Dr. Uthman Barnawi, the Royal Commission for Jubail and Yamba, and his presentation was on slow applied linguistics. Mr. Chris Soughton, Cambridge University Press. His presentation was on embedding critical thinking and other 21st century skills into classroom practice. And Dr. Ali Al-Hoorie, Royal Commission for Jubail and Yamba. His presentation was on motivation of uncertainty. And now we are going to stop for a break. and we are going to proceed on with our presentations on 12:30.